Why do dumb characters make the best couples? Ira and Gigi are two of Dandadan's goofiest characters, but they're shipped almost as much as the main couple. It makes sense because they're both introduced as romantic rivals, they're both portrayed as the good-looking, popular kids, and considering how blind they are to the main couple, they're both kind of idiots. But this ship has one problem. It seems really boring. See, the fun of shipping is supporting a couple that doesn't seem canon. It's a way to take two characters who aren't explicitly being set up in a relationship and make theories with other fans about why they could make a good couple. The problem with Ira and Gigi is that it's almost too easy. I mean, think about it. Gigi likes Momo and Ira likes Okarun. There's a pretty good chance that when these two are finally a couple in the end of Dandadan, we'll find out that Ira and Gigi decided to be together. The problem is that it's easy to ship these two because they fill basically the same roles and it feels kind of lazy, which is probably why it's the most popular ship besides Okarun and Momo. And yet, people have been shipping these characters since before the anime, and a lot of people care about it. So maybe it isn't so boring. In fact, when you actually look at all of the interactions between them, there's a lot of hidden chemistry between Ira and Gigi that goes unnoticed. Add in the fact that their dynamic is so simple, and these hidden layers make Ira and Gigi surprisingly genius considering they're both idiots. In fact, you could even argue that it's the best ship in Dandadan because it's not canon, and most of their interactions are subtle, meaning that it allows for even more creativity than the main couple. So this is why we need to explore all of these easy to miss moments and figure out just how well these two dummies work together. But before we figure out why those two work, we should understand what makes any ship work. I said before that shipping usually involves non-canon relationships. Actually, there's a lot of shippers who talk about couples that are as close to canon as you can get. For example, a lot of people liked Gray and Juvia before they were a thing. It was never officially canon because Gray never returned her feelings, but because Juvia was so openly into Gray, it was clear that they were always being set up as a couple. Shipping can be fun regardless of how canon the couple is. The reason non-canon couples are so fun is because they involve a lot of subtle context. Canon couples are only boring when the only reason they're a couple is because that's just what the writer decided, but we never see any examples of organic chemistry. In Dandadan, this is why nobody really likes the fact that Ira is into Okarun. The only reason Ira likes Okarun is because he said something nice to her one time. After that, she is absurdly obsessed with him. The only reason we believe she likes him is because she's constantly saying it. There's no real chemistry between them, so nobody really supports it. If we got some rare moments where Okarun and Ira got along really well, then you'd see theories about Okarun leaving Momo for Ira. But you don't, and it's because there's nothing to support it. So when it comes to ships, the one requirement is that there be some kind of chemistry that is believable given the context given outside of forced narratives. And this is why people like the Ira-Gigi ship so much, because there are no forced narratives and their subtle interactions make their dynamic surprisingly fun. To be fair, I was never a fan of this ship until recently. For years, I thought it was boring because it was obvious. Plus, it's like seeing the two popular kids dating. It's like in High School Musical if Troy dated Sharpay. It's an example of what you might call the prom king and prom queen couple. At first glance, it seems vain and just plain boring. But then I was like, alright, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something I'm missing. So I asked that all too important question. Why does everyone else like them? So I jumped to Twitter, and it only took me a few seconds to find people posting a bunch of interactions I had completely forgotten about. Actually, the first example isn't even an interaction. It's a connection that I didn't even think about. I found this drawing comparing Ira and Gigi comforting their respective yokai. And this is when the ship started to click for me, because suddenly I thought about the fact that Okarun never did the same thing. Okarun only has Turbo Granny because he was possessed and lost his jewels. But Ira and Gigi both made deliberate choices to accept their yokai in moments of compassion. And what makes these moments so similar is that they did this for total strangers, not for friends or family. So this made me realize that even before Gigi meets Ira, we have some very real chemistry between them. We see that given the right circumstances, they're both characters who will express compassion for strangers who clearly need help. Once I realized this, all of the other interactions started to make perfect sense. So much so that I'm kinda mad I forgot about them. For example, there's this extra scene from volume 15. Here, Gigi runs into Ira as Evil Eye. He asks Ira to go buy drinks with him, and when she asks why he doesn't want to go with Momo, Evil Eye says he would rather go with Ira, and she responds by blushing. Of course, Evil Eye adds that he picked Ira because she should have more money, so it seems to cancel things out, but this is the perfect example of moments shippers love. It appears to be a one-off thing, but it clearly serves as a hint at Ira and Gigi getting along. It's a lot like one of the ships in Witch Watch between Nemu and Keigo. Keigo likes Nemu, but he's too shy to act on it. But when he turns into his split personality wolf, he has no problem flirting with Nemu. It's almost like drunk talk. Basically, the fact that Gigi said he wants to hang out with Ira still means something, even though he technically said it as Evil Eye. But the beauty of this scene isn't that it's obvious. In fact, it clearly ends with the two characters fighting and seems to imply that this wasn't going anywhere. But the genius of this scene is that it doesn't negate what happens before the last panels. Gigi still said he'd rather hang out with Ira, and Ira still blushed. It's intentionally vague and open-ended, so it leaves plenty of room for shippers to make theories. This is why the Ira and Gigi ship is surprisingly fun, because with Okarun and Momo, they make a great couple, but the fun isn't in shipping them. The fun is in watching them so clearly be in love with each other. But when it comes to Ira and Gigi, it's not obvious that they would be a couple, so the fun is taking moments like this and coming up with ways they could end up together. In that sense, you could find their ship to be even more fun than the main couple. Now, of course, that might be a bit of a stretch for most people, but at the very least, it's easy to see why this ship has been so popular for so long. One of the reasons is because they've always complemented each other. For example, when Ira and Okarun move into Momo's house, Ira tells Gigi to grab her bags, and Gigi does it with a smile. At first glance, it seems kinda toxic because Ira is so bossy and takes advantage of Gigi because he's kind of a goof. But it's actually because he's such a goof that Gigi actually has fun doing this. For him, it's like pretending to be a bellhop. The thing with Gigi is that it's practically impossible to bully him. He's so simple and so nice that nothing really offends him. In fact, even though it seems toxic, their dynamic is actually a match made in heaven. To look at it the other way, Gigi is such a free spirit that he usually does whatever he wants. The guy practically has ADHD, so who better to keep him in line than the bossy Ira? We see this after he transforms, and Ira is the first one to scold him for not using hot water. Gigi immediately bows and submits. It's funny because the two characters seem to be complete opposites. Gigi is the free spirit that's down for whatever. Meanwhile, Ira is the bossy buzzkill. I mean, moments later when the Hayashi band shows up, Okarun and Momo are cheering, but Ira covers her ears. It shows us that she's clearly the mom friend of the group and might as well say something like, "Oh, you kids and your loud music." But the reason this works is because instead of serving as an obstacle, these opposite personalities actually complement each other. Someone commented this on one of my videos, and I can't remember exactly what they said, but they said something to the effect of, you can have opposite characters with chemistry as long as they have similar values. And it wasn't until I thought about it later that I realized this is why another very similar ship works. For those of you who grew up with Kim Possible, you might remember that at the very end of the final season, Kim's cheerleader rival Bonnie ends up with one of the villains, Junior. At first it seems weird because she's so bossy and he's a textbook pushover, but then you remember that they're the two most vain human beings on the planet, and you're like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. And it's the same thing with Ira and Gigi. Not that they're vain or anything. Far from it, actually. Ira is kinda like Bonnie. She's the bossy one. And Gigi is so nice that he ends up being a pushover. One reason this works is because it's a give and take. Ira keeps Gigi in line, but Gigi is also the only one who can stand up to Ira besides Momo. There's a scene where they're talking about Momo's new job as a maid. Ira acts as her usual bully self and says she'll go visit Momo, obviously to embarrass her. But Gigi being Gigi Gigi completely misses that and is excited to go with her. Then when Ira considers getting a job there to impress Okarun, Gigi genuinely asks Ira if she's capable of serving customers. It's funny because it's a sincere question about her qualifications coming from an innocent guy, but the obvious implication is that Ira is such a bitch that she would be a terrible waitress. Scenes like this show us how even though they seem like polar opposites, their personalities perfectly complement each other. The other reason Ira and Gigi work so well is because of how much they have in common. With Bonnie and Junior, it works because she's a plastic and he's a himbo. They're a match made in hell. With Ira and Gigi, they work because they're both idiots. Gigi is a goof and Ira keeps him in line. Ira is in love with herself and Okarun, but Gigi is so innocent that he can upset Ira without even trying. But there's so much beyond that. In this post here, you can see how Ira and Gigi will often have the same reactions. You can also see Gigi teasing Ira and Ira mildly tolerating it. One of the examples I haven't seen though is how they both reacted to the new character Zuma. Zuma shows up at school to talk to Momo, but because Ira and Gigi haven't met him yet and see that he has yokai powers, they assume the worst and both rush to defend Momo, showing us that they both have an impulse to protect everyone else. So clearly Ira and Gigi have a lot in common. They both act first and ask questions later. They both have compassion for people in need. And they're both idiots. But they're perfect idiots. She keeps him in line and he teases her without even realizing it most of the time. This ship can come off as boring because it looks like a Troy and Sharpay kind of deal. But they have a lot of interactions where we see real chemistry, and the best part is that these aren't forced narratives. It's not a canon relationship like Okarun and Momo. It's an open-ended dynamic that has plenty of context and leaves tons of room for fans to make their own theories about an anime that's already full of romance. And that is why Ira and Gigi are a perfectly dumb couple.